Sorry, you were saying, so did you have to get him to tone it down?
I do. I have. He's full of opinions. Not all of them popular. Many of them not. And we have to walk a fine line of pushing and still creating a big tent of a bunch of different kinds of folks that are involved in the work. And so, like, let's walk that back just a tiny bit.
No, that's great. I have to say though, I did. So when I was sent it, it was actually my mom who sent me the link. She was like, "You need to read this." I think, was it November? I'm not sure when I reached out to you, David, but at the time, you know, when you have your like good moments, I'm like, yeah. And then other times I do think to myself, why do I do this? Do you know what I mean? Like I could be doing anything else that doesn't, you know, where I don't get attacked and don't get to do this. So I was feeling quite sorry for myself in that moment. So, and then my mom was like, "I'll make you feel better. Let me just send you the link to this article." I was like, "Thanks, Mom." But it did make me feel better. And then later on, she said, "So did you read it? What did you think?" I said, "Well, I just sent David a video to see if he's going to jump on a live with me." So, you know, I was clearly impressed. So yeah, that's how we got here. So, David, I'm going to ask you this question. What did you think when you saw the email from me? Because it's not a usual email, is it really?
That's true. Not so in some ways, of course, you know, we feel honored. In other ways, the first thing is we check like, is this real? What is this? Like, who's Shereen? What is this something we want to do? But I think pretty quickly we were able to dig and like, okay, she's real. This is a real conversation. Who knows? Maybe she's, you know, got some agenda or plan, but everything about her looks real. This looks good. Looks like she has a good network. So let's give it a shot. So we are regularly filtering those kind of things. So you definitely rose to the like, hey, let's respond. Let's give it a shot.
Oh, well, I feel very honored. And Lauren, what did you think? Because I think they must have sent it to you and was like, "I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think?"
And I said, yes, let's keep pushing on the space. It's a very different kind of conversation than we usually get to have. I get to have some with small business communities that I'm part of, but being able to speak out publicly and push on, even we've committed to several third-party commitments, and we think of those as like a starting point, but that's not the end goal. We need to keep pushing and keep talking about things, and we're certainly good at pushing the envelope, so why not do that publicly?
Yeah. And I love conversations where I don't have to filter. So I was like, this one, we could say what we want. We don't have, whoever's in the audience, enjoy it. That, you know,
yeah,
that's
perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So
and
listen, just go. No, yeah, go. You go.
I've seen your conversation responding to British supermarkets that were doing a terrible job of jumping into the conversation about race. And I'd seen some of that from conversations that I follow on social media. And it was really heartening for me to see this isn't, this is a global conversation. It's not just in the US. It is an entire system of valuing people based on their race that we need to take it apart piece by piece and hold people accountable to that. So I appreciated seeing Shereen's conversation about, well, I don't remember names of supermarkets I've never been to in another country,
some
but
quite big ones. Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, it was an interesting weekend. Unfortunately, the video was trending, so it was the first page of Google search when you typed in the names of so clearly I wasn't popular for that few days. But you know what? It had to be said.
It had to be said.
It had to be said. So just in case everyone's probably thinking, oh no, we've missed like the whole conversation. I thought she said we were starting at 5. No, we just started talking. So I will do an official welcome and open. So thank you everybody for tuning in. I know you've seen, this is like the second time you've seen me this week on a live, but I do less video now because I do more live. So hopefully I've not overstayed my welcome. So really, really pleased to have David and Lauren from Mission Driven Finance join me to just talk about their honest and open views on not only anti-racism, but where they got started. I shared when I said I was going to do this live, the impetus for me doing it was probably twofold. So one is I connected with David last year in, I think, like November or December. I can't remember when I slid into his email. I actually emailed him with a little video. I said, "Hi David, just read your blog. Would you like to come and talk?" So literally that's what I did. But also what's been apparent kind of since then and in the new year is that there is a massive vacuum in open, accessible conversations about racism, about what leadership teams can do, what organizations can do from, if I'm honest, the people who have direct control and power over how fast or slow their organizations get with the program, as I like to say. So I know you've heard a lot from me, as I've recorded well over 140 odd videos on this very subject. So I thought I'll just mute my voice a little bit. But it would be great to kind of talk to who I think is some progressive, CEOs, co-founders, C-suite individuals of a variety of industries who, in my view, are demonstrating moral courage. I think that's the overarching thing for me with this work and what we've got to do. It isn't about who's perfect. It isn't about who's nailed it. It isn't about who's getting public accolade in this. It's about who's got moral courage to do some introspective reflection and then go, do you know what? This is not right. This is not good enough. And we're going to be part of the solution. I want to be part of the solution. So that's the kind of context for why I'm having more of these conversations, because you will see me do more of them throughout this year. And specifically, I came across David's blog and noticed that there was a swear word in the second sentence. So as soon as I saw that, I thought, right then, I need to be reading this. And who is this guy that like swears almost as much as I do? So I was like, we've got to talk. And just to see the honesty, the not sitting on the fence, if I'm honest, in terms of, David, and obviously it's your articles. I'm telling you about your article, which probably sounds very strange, but, not sitting on the fence and, probably using the word privilege about 6 times and then putting it in bold, which I thought was hilarious. So privilege, and I just thought, who is this individual? And also, you wrote this in July. So it was really, so in my view, that was really early in comparison. Like, some people are still catching up now, but you wrote that very early on when there wasn't a lot of people who were individually talking about the subject from a leadership position. They were all doing it behind their public anti-racism statements. And so everyone was doing I stand in solidarity, Black Fist, hashtag, all of that jazz. And then, so when I came across your article, it was a bit like, it's night and day in comparison to what else was happening in an organizational sense. And then the second thing, what I really loved is how collegiate you were in the way that you wrote the article. So you talked about people within the team. Obviously, he talked about you, Lauren, and the impact of not only you in this space, but also how you've helped the business's co-founders to kind of equal. And I just thought, I've just got to talk to you guys. And so here we are.
Here we are. Very excited.
So before we jump in, because I've got like 50 million questions, so I'll just be quiet for a little minute. Lauren, do you want to start and just kind of give people a little bit of who are you? What do you do? You as Lauren, Mission Driven Finance, and David, you jump in and just tell people the story about who you are, I guess.
Sure. So I'm Lauren Gratton, and I'm co-founder and chief community officer of Mission Driven Finance, an impact investment firm based in San Diego, California. And I came to this work not as a financial professional. I grew up mixed race in Hawaii. I'm Irish, Chinese, and Native Hawaiian. And that was wonderful. And I was really privileged to grow up with a ton of my cultural values and a very big melting pot of folks. And then I graduated from college in New York with a degree in philosophy during a prior recession. Really, really fun to have a bachelor's in philosophy in a recession. But then I always knew I was going to work in social change. I worked as a nonprofit fundraiser for close to a decade and worked in the system of philanthropy and realized, this is good. There's a great impulse to support people, and the system is full of very bizarre power dynamics, and we need to activate more money for social change than what we're giving away. We need to use all the tools in the toolbox. And so when I was leaving my last fundraising role, David reached out and said, I think that your skill set would be really helpful in building momentum for impact investing in our local community of San Diego. I'll let David share his background, why he was even thinking about that. But we started this firm almost 5 years ago and really thinking about how do we reconnect capital and community, because these disconnects, these interpersonal feelings of difference or being baked into systems. And we said, we're just going to cut through this. We need to make this different because this is an inefficient and immoral way that we've structured society. So let's take it apart.
Thanks, Lauren. So let's see. David, co-founder with Lauren, CEO of Mission Driven Finance. I got started in this career doing traditional investment management for family office types, others. Often was lucky enough that the money I was managing was inside a charitable foundation of some sort, but I didn't have anything to do with giving it away. But at least I could feel a little bit better that I wasn't just making a rich guy richer all the time, that the money we were making was going to do good. But it was still traditional investment management, traditional asset allocation, nothing around really how the money that was being invested was doing good in the world. At the same time, I was volunteering my life away, sort of the nights and weekends, other things with philanthropic organizations, community organizations, nonprofits, others, looking for different ways. That's how I was in some ways satisfying my entrepreneurial bent and others of love working with startups, community orgs, other sorts of things. And a couple things. One, kept seeing this massive disconnect between the good work going on in communities and the capital allocators, whether family office, philanthropy, otherwise, saying, we want to support these things, we want to do good, and the money is just not moving. It just doesn't happen. And really started getting, frankly, even at the point, so I was chair of our local regional association of grant makers at the time, so heavy involved in the philanthropic world, working with many others. And I'm sitting there in the philanthropic world and saying, this just isn't working. Whatever you all are saying, whatever you all are planning, you're talking about changing education, solving homelessness, climate change, other sorts of things. Well, look at what's been going on for 50 years. Philanthropy's been doing this. It hasn't moved. We haven't moved the needle on closing racial wealth gaps. We haven't moved the needle on education. We haven't moved the needle on health. It's not happening. And so whatever you've been doing, it's not working. And if we're not really willing to say it's got to change, then then nothing changes. So how do we start pushing on that? And at the same time, I think there was still this, everything with philanthropy, government, investment is about control. We're seeing it these days with the GameStop stuff and all the craziness of, wait, we controlled the money. Wait, maybe we don't control the money. And so philanthropy is always been this ivory tower, this silo, like we control, come beg for what you want, and we may bestow our gifts on you. But that's not it. And at the same time, we're getting this, as impact investing in that world was starting picking up, getting this movement of people saying, A, there's different ways of moving capital than what's been happening. And B, I want to do something with my money that's different than what Wall Street has been telling me to do for the last decades, centuries. And so we said, but there aren't really good mechanisms in place. And that's where we started looking for, to say, if we want, as Lauren said, to reconnect capital and community, we need different structures, different people, more people that don't look like me otherwise, that can actually find different ways of moving capital in the community. Because if it's more of the same, it's not going to happen.
Can you take me back to July 2020 when you were starting to, it's like anything, when you do these things all right, it's not like you sit here and plan it for 2 weeks and go, I'm going to write an article, because I feel like, I know it doesn't happen like that. But can you just help everyone else understand where your head was at, and then maybe the conversation that you and Lauren had before it then morphed into this article, and then we can kind of go from there.
Sure. So in part, I mean, our whole team, we're obviously heavily paying attention to what was going on with the Black Lives Matter, the anti-racist. We had multiple team discussions, that sort of thing. But as you might have heard, I get frustrated with the system sometimes. And we kept seeing all the, all these solidarity posts, all these, changing your background to Black, all this sort of stuff. And okay, great. And we had lots of debates of, well, as a company who certainly cares about this and has been in this space, it's part of why we built the company. We can't do nothing. But at the same time, we kept saying, but we don't want to just do the same thing that all the hypocrites are doing, especially in the financial industry that we look at, right? That all of them are posting this stuff and saying, look at what we're doing here, but don't pay attention to what we're doing over here. We said, so what is our voice? So frankly, we had pushed, a lot of people were doing it in April, May, June, and we said, we don't have anything we're adding to this conversation at this point. So we're just going to keep doing the good work we do and keep talking about the good work we do. But then seeing more of that hypocrisy, more of the praise being heaped on some of these corporations for doing things that were not really doing anything or not really changing the system, is where we started thinking about, or I did. And I think, like you said, it wasn't this big plan thing of we're going to put out a post in July. Let's put everything on the board and figure out what we're going to say. I think it was more one of those days walking the dogs where I started thinking, well, what can I do with my voice that might add to the conversation? And also something we'd been wrestling with for years, really, as a firm in this space. And I continually ask myself, what's my role as a white man in this fight, right? Sometimes, and we have lots of discussions, it's to listen, to be an ally, to be quiet, to support. You even asked, like, what do we think when we got your original email? And we often debate, should it be my voice, right? Or is this the time where I should be giving somebody else the opportunity who doesn't look like me to have voice? So when is the right time to take a role as a white man and when is not, and to step back? And I think we're continually wrestling with that, right? Or at least I should say I don't want to hoist on others, is what's my role in this fight? What's our role in this fight? And so I started thinking, well, maybe talking about that is the right answer, right? That's our space to talk about. So talk to our colleagues, team members, particularly I think started with the conversation with Louise, a wonderful Black woman who's one of our community finance fellows on our team, just, talking about that. What's our role? What's my role? And getting some of that thing, those thoughts, which is part of what triggered the dialogue to say, okay, I can really write. So then, of course, I put down a bunch of stuff on paper with a whole lot of swear words and a lot of frustration and anger and things that don't seem like it has any flow or context or all these other things to it. And then I say, hey, Lauren, should we do anything with this? And then Lauren says, okay, well, we can make it something. And then she and the team took it somewhere that we felt pretty good about.
Yeah. If I may drop the first swear word of this live, David's first thoughts are, why are these people getting all this praise? Andreessen Horowitz ain't shit. Like, what is this? You are reinforcing power dynamics. Why is this getting celebrated? We've been doing the work. We have been, our founding was to focus on inclusive economic opportunity. We haven't been out there like pushing on narrative, but we are doing all of these pieces behind the scenes, and like they get press for doing garbage. And so that was really his original emotion. I was like, okay, I hear you, and I agree. Also, then what do we do? How do we paint the picture? Because so often what we find in privileged, mostly white rooms is that folks are asking for concrete actions, concrete steps that they can take. And they're like, I need a path that I can follow because I have not maybe leaned into imagining what a world without race-based values or gender-based or any kind of structural value system looks like. So I need somebody else to show me what could this look like. And I said, okay, let's bring it back to what are tangible, concrete commitments that we can make that aren't just painting Black Lives Matter over the street or, other things like that. I'm like, we don't need a $20 bill with Harriet Tubman on it. We need to have deep systemic change. And what does that look like? What does that look like when it's being pervasive through everything in our lived experience?
And I think that's where, clearly, you're speaking my language. So I'm like, yes. Because most of the conversations, and you're absolutely right about the performative element. So, and I can only talk for myself. So, other people may disagree. But when I saw all these large organizations, and it's not even just large organizations full stop, irrespective of size, it's got nothing to do with size, actually. When I saw all these organizations and the individuals within these organizations all talking about how shocked and horrified they were, all talk, as you said, it was the black square, it was the hashtag, and how they're deeply troubled and whatever else it is. And I was just sat there, like, if you could just have a picture of my whole image, it was like arms folded, and I was just a bit like, are you serious?
We had no idea. Like,
yeah.
Exactly
that piece is like, if you're surprised by George Floyd being killed, then you haven't been listening.
Right.
So it's like,
that's the bit. So I was a bit like, it was, and therefore, and I know there's I get the fact that if you're not used to seeing the world in a particular way, then, it's some things genuinely can be a shock. However, if you're in the world of business, just around you, you will notice things that would make you question. The example that I always use is I worked a lot in London. I'm not from London originally, so grew up north, but I worked a lot in London. And something like 43% of the population in London is multicultural. It's global majority, as I call it, not ethnic minorities. So it's global majority. But when you step into the organizations, how am I the only Black person? How is there only one Asian person or one other that they can't remember the ethnicity because they're trying to find the visual cues? And so when all of this stuff with George Floyd and the protests, that shock about we've never thought about it, I'm a little bit like, but you step outside of your office and you see all the difference of people around you, and you've never thought, why do we not have this in our organization? So it's interesting that your frustration and just like calling time on the bullshit, if I'm honest, is exactly how I felt. And I think that riled me up even more than, to some extent, the silence. The silence was really annoying, but then those people like, quick, we've got to go with something. I just thought, what are you doing? What are you doing? And
is it going to last? Right? Just the amount of money that's flown around this year, but is it sustained change, or was it just them moving something to get the press to show that they've got that solidarity, and then it's still business as usual, right? What's really going to change in terms of what's going on? Are they going to share power? Those sorts of things. And why do we continue thinking the only way to support Black, Indigenous, Latinx, other populations is charity? Like, that's it's not the answer.
Yes. Or equally, conversely, why do we think those individuals in the business sense should be setting up like charities and community interest companies? And, so as Black people, we can be really good entrepreneurs, providing we're in the community space. So again, you have this really strange, it's just very strange to me. I can't even, I just find it really odd. And I think in your article, David, you talked about, I don't know if it was in bold. I don't know if it was one of the phrases that were in bold. There were lots of phrases in bold, so I'm like trying to remember what was in bold. But you talked straight off the bat. You were like, "This isn't about white saviorism." You didn't say white saviorism. You said white savior, but it's not about that. It's not about white people coming in as the the knights to come and save Black people from ourselves. So, can I just ask you, what made you so specific about that? Because to be honest, I'm still getting people onto that page now after all this time. So the fact that you came out quite early on with that, what was behind that?
So I guess for me, that comes back. Well, so a couple things. One, I think it just feels wrong, right? All my work, particularly in the philanthropy and the investment world, it was always about like this bestowing of gifts down, right? And I always called it the great white hope. Like that can't be the activity that is the way this works. That's just constantly reinforcing this power dynamic. And if somebody went and looked and said, well, it's been working, that'd be one thing. It hasn't. So, but it just that great white hope never felt right. But more, I'd say, just for me as well, coming at it, we have the why and the moral imperative and how can we shift the system and everything you're talking about it. From a business standpoint, as an impact investment firm, I know, and again, all these things that were coming out, like, did you know only 1% of VC is going to people that don't look like me? Those sorts of things. We're looking at it and saying, well, where's the opportunity, right? And if I just build another firm that has a bunch of white people in it, well, of course we're not going to be connected to those types of opportunities. And I'm saying, like, so even forget the underlying moral imperative, the reason, all the good stuff we're talking about here. I just think it's a better business, right? I think there are opportunities that we can find by designing a different firm with different diverse viewpoints, other sorts of things. We set up and we said, our investment committee and our leadership team, we wanted a bunch of diversity. We want heavily opposing opinions because I think we're going to make better decisions about the investment. If we have a bunch of people that basically agree coming from the same standpoint, we're going to make bad decisions. We're going to chase the same stuff. We're not going to argue. I'm going to find some deal with some white dude doing some new tech app, and everybody's going to be like, that's great. And I'd rather have a bunch of the team go, that's ridiculous. We should not do that. And here's why. And conversely, and all those things. And so for me, it was, if we're going to make the best decisions and have a firm that's going to succeed as an investment firm, forgetting who we're investing in and why we're investing in it, if we're just going to succeed in making good decisions, we better have some diverse viewpoints on the team or we never will.
Right. Lauren, can I ask you, just thinking about maybe the summer and then, some of the conversations that you've had maybe with peers, right? Because you're in the, you're in the investment world, impact investment world. What other conversations are people having? And I guess, what have your views been on those conversations? It doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing, but I'm just interested in, because you guys are clearly on the more progressive side. And I don't mean necessarily in terms of your actions, but the confidence, the assertiveness, and the I don't give a shit scale. Can I say that?
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Clearly not everyone is there. So just where have your peers and your contemporaries been in this space, and what sort of conversations have they been having?
We're so fortunate that I think to have a ton of peers and friends in the space, and we're extremely collaborative. And I think building off where David was going, this isn't new, right? We've been doing this work as mission-driven finance for 5 years. And that's been in coalition with other people of color, folks in the Deep South, folks in overlooked communities that have been extraordinarily impressive. When we went to Louisiana, almost 2 years ago, to meet with and explore building a fund there, we met with probably 30 Black entrepreneurs doing such incredible work. And I see that. I'm like, I am used to seeing BS, terrible pitches from people who are just used to mediocrity being celebrated. And I went to Baton Rouge and was amazed by just the inherent ability to see what their community needed and fill that need. And we said, this is, like David said, an overlooked opportunity. What would be possible if we invest in these folks? So we've been having lots of conversations that are really building from the work we've already been doing of why is it that Tevin in Baton Rouge hasn't been able to get access to a line of credit? He's a really cool electrical engineer and he's doing electrical contracting. He hires from his community, lots of folks that are reentering from the justice system, and he can't get access to a line of credit to get an insurance bond. We listen to them and hear, what are those individual challenges? I'm getting asked to have a $300,000 bond on a $500,000 project. I just can't make that work. These structures have been made to say, you can't have this. You can have only this little bit amount of success. And so we've really been listening to and hearing what are each of those micro and macro aggressions that are coming at a systemic level and saying, okay, what can we do to structure this differently? I think of, I'm part of the steering committee of the Inclusive Capital Collective, which is about 85 community-based fund managers. And we're all talking about what are these structures? How can we take them apart? How can we tap into really restorative and transformative capital for communities so that we can rise up together? Not so that it's, again, that white hope, white saviorism. Oh, you need this because you can't make it. It is instead a valuing of, I see your potential and I see the system is failing you. So let's put a different system in place. Think of Common Future. They're like my absolute best friends. Also, they use my face in their marketing material. So I feel like I have to appreciate them. But the Common Future has been really pushing the envelope on a lot of conversations on where this intersection of local economy, race, systemic structures, how do these things intersect and how can we imagine and build a better world?
And I think with that, unless you wanted to follow up, is that like we had a lot of conversations and early about that aspect of not giving a shit, right? It's why I love conversations like this and unfiltered, and doing it is even early. Wonderful friend who runs a PR firm that we were working with, and she was coaching us on how do we get up in front of a room and sort of toe the line and be centrist and be in the middle, because you don't want to piss anybody off, right? That's too risky. And I kept seeing, and I think coming at this again back from the philanthropy world and what's our role, how do we use our voice, is we're seeing more and more the shift where not taking a position means you have no followers, right? Like that. Now, are we ending up in a more polarized society? I think we're seeing that, but we're also seeing saying nothing is not okay. Now we have to balance that saying nothing with the stuff, like we said, the performative, the hypocrisy, that sort of thing. But you position I love framing from one of our friends at the Heron Foundation, who says you really only have two types of assets or things you're doing: examined and unexamined. You can decide later whether it's good or bad, but you have to acknowledge, am I looking or not looking? Like, if I was doing a follow-up piece to this one, it'd be, look at what's going on today. Your money at Schwab and your money at Blackstone have supported the biggest Trump supporters in the whole thing. So if you believe in that, great. If you don't, is that where you want your money to be working? Well, You can't just say, I don't want to look, I don't want to know, right? That's not acceptable. Now, what's the role of a CEO? Should they be front and center? Like, that's one of the big debates, right? Should a company be taking political positions? Like, huge debate, and I don't even want to say that I have an answer to it, but not acknowledging, not taking a position, not looking at it is not acceptable, right? So we have to decide what in that is there. And I think that's where we say, when we come back to you, like said, and we look at it and say, what's our role? What's my role as a white man? Like, when do we use our voice? And part of it, we said, well, it should be having access to rooms that I get access to and deciding to not give a shit, right? that I have the opportunity to be on stage in certain places and talking to people and things, and to push back, right? I have one example, have a wonderful friend, mentor in the investment space, been involved for a long time, good guy, older white guy running a good firm, massively philanthropic, but still that traditional huge two bucket thinking. I make money over here, don't care how I make money, and then I give it away and do a lot of good helping people. Very well aligned. He brought me an investment deal that looked good type of company, something I knew, a company that was actually doing good work. And I started thinking, oh, I'd look at this one. Pulled up the webpage, leadership team, all dudes. There were some dudes that didn't look like me, but all dudes. And I told him, I can't do this. Like,
really?
and we had a debate, and he was like, why should that matter? Right? Why are you telling me that there's no woman on the team? And I said, that you can't do this deal. And I said, I think it's just a sign that somewhere in there, there's bad judgment. I'm not telling you this company's bad. I'm not telling you I don't know, but I don't think they're going to make the best decisions. There's something underlying going on why they haven't hired a woman. I don't know what it is,
Really?
but I don't want to be involved, right? I can't make a bet on the long-term thing of this company because there's a reason that's happened, good or bad, intentional or not intentional, like, but I'm not going to do it. And he was a bit frustrated, right? It did not compute from his world of why that could be a lens when everything else about the company looked like a great investment. And so I put that's the role, right? That's where that I get the opportunity to push back in a space like that with other investors that others might not. And how do we do that and not give a shit about it, right? What's the worst that can happen? So yeah.
And I always think of, I did a series of conversations over the summer and fall on alternative term sheets. Really dry, really attracts a very white male audience. And I said, like, haha, I tricked you. You think you're coming to talk about the actual what's on this and what's the structure, and I'm going to talk to you about power dynamics. And
really
tricking folks into the conversation and making them question things that they hadn't already, right? The conversation David's mentioning about looking at an investment, like, you think you're going to be talking just at this level, but we're going to take you a level deeper and talk about why those assumptions that you have not examined are actually going to have a ripple effect into the economics.
So I'm going to ask, so I've been trying to loosely keep an eye on the conversation in here in the comments, because I do my best, because I'm like, there's so much I want to say. I'm like, yes, Lauren, but there's a common thread in here, and I know it comes up pretty much in some way, shape or form with every single live that I do. And I'm thinking about people who are employees. And I would say not only just because they're either, people of color or they're Black, or I would just say people who care. It's not about skin color. These are about people who care. And they cannot get their leadership teams to engage with this. So all the things that you were saying, David, that they shouldn't do, they're basically doing this. So, head down, let's not pretend, let's not talk about it because it doesn't affect us. We don't make our money. It's got nothing, how we make our money, the service, the products that we offer have got nothing to do with what's going on in politics. Race is seen as politics. I guess there's two bits, and I'd be interested in both of your answers because I know it's going to be slightly different in terms of approach, right? But what advice would you give to those employees who were trying to push? So that's question number one. And then question number two is, what advice would you give to the leadership teams who were going, I can't hear you?
You want to go first, Lauren? You want me to?
I want you to. I want to noodle on that for a minute.
Cool.
I think I'll start with the leadership teams because I guess I consider it simple relatively. That's just short-termism, right? And if you want to build things that are going to last, that are going to succeed, then you have, even if you don't believe in this movement, let's just say like you think BLM is crazy, right? It is happening. So if you want it to happen, I think of it like I knew a company in the oil space. They were not an environmental company, but they knew if they didn't set things up to be able to handle environmental regulations that are obviously going to be coming down the pipe business isn't going to succeed, right? So I look at it and say, if you aren't paying attention to this, if you aren't looking at how do I cultivate more diverse opinions, how do I make sure I'm not an asshole when I'm going to go out there and hire people, because more young people are going to start looking at that, like, you're just missing the boat for your business, right? So to me, like, I think like this just like that's just stupid leadership, right? Like, you is not, eventually it's going to crater. Maybe that's 20 years from now and you made $2 billion before it did, but like, I just don't think it's good business. For team members, I don't know. I mean, that's tough. I mean, I've been there to some degree without any form of the racist attitudes or anything like that. But when you're not comfortable with what's going on at leadership level, and what do you do about that, right? And then your decision is, my role is to fight, and I'm going to stay inside and do what I can to try and force the change. And you see that at, we get the headlines from the big temp companies, minority of employees. I don't mean minorities, but like some small set is trying to push, right? And is that the battle you want to have? Or do you want to go work somewhere else and, push with a supportive leadership team? And like, I don't know if there's a good answer. I think that's an individual decision of just where do you want to fight, right? I do think change in companies can be made from the inside, but doesn't mean it's going to be fun to be an employee. And I guess I look at that from the standpoint of, if there's not an opening to push, I don't know what you do, right? I think of it like, from this space of cultivating audiences and having conversations and that sort of thing. Like, when you got the extreme poles, there's people in the middle that you can shift, right? That like are like, okay, like maybe somebody listening to this conversation, I know as a leader I should do something, but I don't know what to do. That's the conversation to have, right?
Right.
And that we can, and you can make move. A leader that's like, absolutely not, who cares, what's wrong with being like, the odds of shifting that one, I don't know. So I go, is that where you want to put your life fighting, right? Or can you go work somewhere where maybe there is room to shift something? And yeah, I don't know. I think I'll stop there. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Lauren, just before you jump in, I just want to say, connected to that point, that's really interesting, because what you've done is basically paraphrased in a really good way what I always say is like kind of my advice. And it's also the advice that I take when I decide who I'm going to support in this space, because you have two groups of people. And exactly as you said, there are those who want to do something, but they don't know how. So this is not about them coming to me to convince them that racism is a thing. They get it. They want to be part of the solution, but they're a bit like, this is completely new territory for me. Then you have the others who come to me because they have to, and they want me to help them understand why it's important. In the nicest way possible, you need to move to the left because I'm not for you. And it's that same sort of thing. So from an employee perspective, I'm not saying it's as clear cut as that, but sometimes you want to think about how much is it due to not knowing the how. So that's the open door you can push on, versus, bloody hell, we've got to do something about it. But, you still got to convince me that it's worth my time, energy, money, investment. I think that's a harder shift to try and, if I'm really honest, I don't know how you do that. I don't even have any advice because I don't even deal with people like that. Do you know what I mean?
No, and I think that's where, like you said, then in that case, sometimes quitting and saying why is your action, right?
Yeah.
That you hope makes change. I mean, I don't know. That's that balance. And if I'm using words that Lauren and team have taught me of are we in, where is cancel culture and boycott good, and where does it just go too far, right? There's an element of saying, I just can't do this anymore, I'm not going to support it, that is good, right? And you should do. And maybe that is the way you fight, and just say, I can't work for you. And maybe they realize they're losing good people, right? Yeah. And other times you should stay and make change over 10 or 20 years and shift the entire path of a company.
Yeah. And I don't think it's totally cut and dried. There's, right, test it. David talked about our decision processes at Mission Driven Finance, and that we've always built from the get-go and a diverse team of lived, learned, and labored experiences, very different perspectives. And we have some drag out debates. And we knew that from the founding. And wanted that. That's not comfortable culturally for everyone. And so we also brought in a facilitator to do a difficult conversations training of how can you have conversations with somebody that you're like, you must be nuts. There's no way. And being able to find some common ground to be able to talk about these things. Not every organization is going to have run a difficult conversations training. I am not kidding anybody about that. But as employees, you can engage in some of those tools and say, okay, I am having a really hard time. How can I frame what I am feeling, what I am seeing in a way that makes sense for my audience of my boss or the leadership team? And try and make things in usually economic terms, usually in a way that sees a path forward and isn't entirely blaming, right? Like, it's not your fault that you've had 40 years of cultural hegemony that's telling you this. I'm just saying, like, let me open your eyes, right? Being able to find some of that place. If you haven't already been working in a place that has a leadership team, a leadership culture that's supportive and listens to everyone, do what you can to build that muscle of being able to advocate for yourself and to do that with a path forward together. Again, trying to stay away from cancel culture. Actually, back here is Adrienne Marie Brown's book, We Will Not Cancel Us, and Other Dreams of Transformative Futures. Of how can we do this work together? What does it look like to stay in it and to work through the messy? So that's one piece is to empower yourself. But I think what both of you are saying is that other research I've seen, if you as a leadership team think, oh, we're just going to start, we're going to get to an MVP or minimum viable product, and then once we get some traction, we'll think about diversity. No. That is not going to work. Any employees that you try to recruit that have different lived experiences from your own are going to look at your page like how David as an investor looked at your page and said, that ain't for me. There's something that said, I don't value having different voices, and it will be a self-reinforcing cycle. And be mindful that if you want to build, we're a global society. We're having a conversation across the pond. That's what this future is. And so you need to just accept that we are going to have a whole bunch of different kinds of folks, and you're going to need to be able to work together. So, it's short-sighted, as David was saying, to just like put your fingers in your ears. You need to figure out how to do this and truly value diversity as a strength.
Can I put Lauren on the spot? Because I have a question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I guess I like, so this is the constant wrestle, right? That sort of thing. How do we balance agency? Saw that come through the comments, the difference between agency and voice, the power of the team, incorporating those things, and still making decisions and moving forward, right? And we wrestle with this and rewrite out charts, like the difference between input and acceptance, and like at some point authority and decisions being made. And I'm sure if our whole team was listening to this, half of them would be like, well, there's plenty of times where David just makes the decision and tells us what's going to happen and we move forward, right? And and then there's other times where we have a full discussion and team makes a decision, or people do it on themselves or make the decisions themselves and move forward, and we try and create those opportunities. But I think that, I guess I'm asking Lauren, like, how do we balance when that decision authority, as much as we try and create flat and inclusive structures, some things just end up being top down, or people push and they've been trying something and we say no for 2 years and they're getting frustrated before we finally say yes, because for whatever reason.
Oh, ouch. When it really comes down to it, it's tough. And decision authority, especially in growing teams, is one that is always challenging to work through. I think where I keep landing is, we try and use role frameworks like RASCI or RAPID or whatever you want to use for MOCA. They have all different kinds of who has what kind of role. And
Yeah.
if you can unpack those processes, 9 times out of 10, our team wants to have input. They want to have their voice be heard, even if they don't want to have the ultimate decision authority, right? And so being able to build that into structures, not getting to snap decisions that we haven't listened, but listening as part of the process and then getting to the decision. You know, we are often shifting how we've actually incorporated things based on what we're hearing from our team. We build in a lot of team connectivity, lots of feedback loops, and a practice of iterating. Like, let's try it, let's see it, let's see how it goes. You know, I think of our community finance fellowship program. We hired 5 folks from overlooked, underestimated communities to equip them with the tools of finance and also be transformed by the experience and hearing why there are cultural nuances capital isn't flowing. They have many suggestions on how to run this program better. And in the first quarter that they were with us, they started 1 week into California shelter-in-place orders too. So they've been with us through some wild roller coaster of a year. But they provided anonymized feedback to a partner of ours saying, we feel like if we make these recommendations, they're not going to put it in place for us. It's going to help the next cohort and not our team. And I was like,
really?
What have we done that says I don't make that change immediately? Like, I heard from you last week on a Friday and we changed our team meeting structure on Monday. Being able to make sure that folks feel like their voice is heard and do that by putting those actions into place and to naming them so that they can hear it again. I made this change because I heard you. I hear that this is frustrating and we're committed to making that action. Doing that even at the smallest level is building trust so that when you get to the big stuff, you can have those juicy conversations.
Yeah, and I think, do you know what? That is so true. And if you think about, well, it's not even you think about it, I will know this, and I have the stories and I have the screenshots and all the rest of it, is there are so many Black colleagues in organisations at this moment in time of all shapes and sizes who fundamentally feel like their voices are not heard. Do you know what I mean? And I think just so that kind of iterative process that you talked about, Lauren, and the start small, right? So it's not about thinking that everything the team wants, the team gets. Do you know what I mean? It's like anarchy, oh yeah, because they've said. But you have to show that you're listening, and because it's the only way, because when it does come to the big stuff, or when it comes to some real issues within the business that maybe you can't see because you're here doing all of this stuff, you need to know that they feel safe enough, empowered enough, confident enough to be able to come to you and say, listen, because we all know there's all sorts of skeletons within. I'm not saying you have skeletons, but there's all sorts of things that happen. And then you find out, meaning leadership teams find out when it hits the press and when is this. And so I always think, what is the culture that you have that you didn't know this? Back to this point, like how is that? So, but you have to start with little things to build up, because you can't just say to people like, yeah, like, talk to me, I hear you, and then you do nothing with it time and time again. And I think that's what we're seeing with the racial equity piece and the anti-racism is, you've got to be specific, you've got to call it for what it is, and you've got to acknowledge the fact that you're not going to have all the answers, but you still got to go and do something anyway, because nobody's expecting you to come with the blueprint, but they just want you to listen and to do something about it. And I think it sounds really basic, doesn't it? But honestly, I think that companies can make a lot of inroads and leaders can make a lot of inroads if they just mission before ego, not to nick the phrase from your company name, but
yeah. And I think I guess I'd even say more than listening, it's how do we create the trust and safety, right? The trust between. So not just listening, but that I actually trust that it's valid. And it's certainly not easy, right? And everybody's got a job and trying to collect a paycheck. And depending on your risk tolerance, back to that we have more than others. I understand there's employees like, I'm sure there's times where they've been sitting in a meeting wanting to call me out on my bullshit. And are they going to when that could mean
No, they come
that
tell me afterwards.
they come tell you. But that's the point, right? Like, but that's exactly what you're saying, Shereen, is like, we can do all this. We can try, I can try everything to say I've got open door policy. Like, let's talk, to create an environment where in any meeting, and I think that's where we look at, yes, decisions have to get made. Yes, there's some structure. Yes, there's people that are your supervisor or boss or whatever. But when we're in a meeting having a conversation, anybody at any level should be able to bring up any point about it, call others on bullshit, whether it's around racist stuff, just how the business is working, whatever it is, right? We want to hear all voices. It still doesn't mean that's always going to happen, right? And Lauren will even tell me, like, I'm sure there's times where people haven't spoken up. And part of that's personalities of when am I comfortable talking in a big Zoom meeting and when do I need to do something one-on-one? But so how do we create that? And it's not, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's a good answer other than like, we keep trying to do it. But I know there's times where we're not hearing things from the team. And then to your point, like, I hope it doesn't get to the point where it's the press, like you said, but you hear some grumbling where people talk to each other and it's like, okay, well, what environment did I not create that made them comfortable even going to Lauren and not to me, right? Like how can I change? What can we do? And don't always have the answers other than like keep iterating, keep trying to reinforce that we want to hear those elements and that we trust the opinions, right? Or we trust the voice, not just that like, yeah, I heard you. Thank you for speaking up, right?
There's some too of like very tactical things. I mentioned like hearing a feedback on a Friday, having how some of our meetings were structured, and then changing it for our team meetings that happen on Monday. Those small pieces that we learned and heard it's really hard to speak up. I mean, our team is 17. It's not that big, but it's big enough, and especially for emerging professionals who have had to perform at 200% to be taken seriously at 100%. They don't want to be vulnerable in a new environment. And so having ways that we can take those structures apart, make them less scary. We use Zoom breakout rooms, right? So you have smaller groups. You don't have to say it in front of, the big boss, but you can maybe say it in front of like a little boss or somebody that's in a different part of the company that may feel more psychological safety in raising those concerns up the chain or walking through and talking about it with you. And then another is it's actually been a blessing that being remote and being virtual, using virtual tools for collaboration that allow for some anonymizing. We use Google Jamboard and Miro, these like online whiteboarding tools. But we'll just like throw ideas out there. It's not tied to you. Just like when you were in an in-person facilitation, you were given sticky notes. You maybe could do some like forensic handwriting analysis to see who it was. But most of the time, it was a way to capture people's voices that weren't comfortable speaking up, or there was literally not a pause in the conversation for them to speak up. So having these other tools that allow for folks' voices to get heard. I look at our Miro board after the fact and I'm like, I literally have no idea who wrote which post-it. All of these are the same to me. I treat my senior leadership team the same as I treat our coordinators, and your input is equally weighted, right? And so being able to look at some of these technological tools that can help democratize your system.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, listen, I know you won't believe me, but we've been going for 58 minutes. Did it feel long?
A lot.
We can keep going. You're the one. We're
I know. Well, listen,
you and Friday night happy hour. So
I know. Although I am known for going well over time, but because it's Friday, I'm very conscious not to do that. But before I close off, I'm going to start with you, Lauren. If you had to give one bit of advice to a CEO who's, even after listening to this whole session, is still thinking, I'm still not sure if I want to get into this whole kind of equity, anti-racism thing, what would you say?
Come with me to a meeting and listen to the brilliance of our Black, Indigenous, people of color friends. hear how amazing they are and see if that's still true after being in a conversation with these amazing community fund managers.
Okay. David, what would you say? Without swearing.
Yeah. Oh, I can't swear anymore? That's done?
No, I'm kidding.
I think I'd come down to, and we see this, and Lauren even mentioned make the economic case, right? And I put this, like, if we want to use context, like Walmart isn't going to change their climate and environmental policies until it makes economic sense to some degree, right? You can push a little bit because you think it's the right thing to do, but you got to at least be cost neutral economics, roughly, if not better, which can be analyzed all sorts of ways. So, like, when do I move to electric trucking? When it works, right? Or I can see long-term fuel savings if I'm simplifying, whatever that is. And so I look at it and I think I come back to that. I mean, certainly you have to believe this is a good thing, right? I mean, if you're completely racist, like, again, we're back to like, I don't know what to do, right? But on the assumption you want, then I still think like you got to be able to see the economic case to your business of why you go through this, right? Which can be as simple level as hiring and retaining talent, right? You don't do that these days, like especially in global communities, areas like yours here in San Diego. Otherwise, like you need to be able to get diverse voices. I don't know how all of the data will show you it's smarter decision making, right?
Yeah.
To have different opinions in your business. And I go so far as to say, we don't think you should go all the way left, if you will, in the San Diego way. We call it San Franciscoizing, right? Like if everybody's in the same page so far on one side, you're probably also guilty of not making good decisions, right? So the point being just like embracing that diversity is going to make your business stronger through talent retention, through decision making. It's going to be an economic benefit. Are you going to be able to measure this straight line of like, we did this in a meeting and we made more money next year? No, but I think just accepting that there's economic power in diversity is, to me, just like you got to open your mind to that, and then you can do a lot.
When we wrap up, I'll put a link to the Kellogg Foundation's business case for racial equity in the LinkedIn comments.
Perfect. I have seen that. That's a good shout. And I think, David, I do like your comment about the fact that, you know, when you're looking at all of these businesses that might look the same, there's a question about judgment. Not good or bad, but what you're saying is, I just question your judgment. So and sometimes that's enough, isn't it? You know, you question the judgment, you decide to make a decision not to invest. You know, somebody else might do because they might like the fact that your business is, you know, everyone looks the same. They might like that, and that's such as life. But I do like that point about judgment. I think I might use it.
It's all yours. You can have it.
Thank you. Well, listen, thank you so much for opening my email, watching my video, saying yes. Then Lauren, you saying yes. Then lovely Wilder, who is not on here, but Wilder is the person in your team who I connected with first. And we had like deep and meaningful conversations, kind of, I think it was probably on a Friday as well. There's something about Friday with all of us. I don't know what it is. So I'm going to thank her, even though I know she's not on the screen. But super appreciate you just taking the time, you know, sharing your views unfiltered, and the practicality and just common sense of what you had to say. I think many people will appreciate it. And a lot of people they watch my lives like later on. So all I'm going to say is don't be surprised if other people start sliding into your DMs. It's not my fault. It's got nothing to do with it. If they see and I can't, there's nothing I can do. But I think you'll have a few people going to look on the website, a few people going to have a look, because it's not often that you hear, you know, very senior people in the investment circle, and even in impact investing, you know, it should be the bedrock, right? You know, social inequity should be the bedrock of, you still don't have these conversations in public. So thank you for being brave enough and leading the way.
Thank you for creating an opportunity to do it in public. I think it's not going to change if people like you aren't creating the space for these conversations, right? So love that you're doing it, and glad we could support you in a little bit, and hope after people watch this one, they still watch more of your videos. And we didn't turn them off, but I think it's good.
There's a lot. There is. Lauren, thank you.
Thank you, Shereen. This is amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, everybody else who's watching, as usual, clearly, but you know what? I think you got a lot from this conversation, so I don't feel the need to apologise for not getting to the comments. But thank you, as always, for tuning in, for supporting. And I will be back next Thursday with Matt Phelan, co-founder of Happiness Index. And we're similar vein of conversation, but his personal journey with anti-racism and his need to talk to white people to basically get them to do something about this in leadership positions. So as you can see, there's a theme. So yeah, I do my bit. It'll probably be on my gravestone, isn't it? This is what Shereen did. Like, so there we go. Thank you all, and I'm going to end the broadcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.